Hi, everybody. Welcome to HPConnects. This is week 12 of HPConnects. I'm really excited. Today we've got Matt Leskanic and Greg Angel of Surety Bond Professionals. Today's going to be really great, especially if you do work in the public sector. They're going to teach us how to diversify and grow, teach you guys how to diversify and grow your business in uncertain times. And right now it's definitely uncertain. So gentlemen, if you are available, please show yourselves.
Hey guys.
Hey
Hi.
everyone.
Thanks, Anastasia. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. Want to just start by welcoming everyone here. We've got a few people in the chat with Bryn, Mark, Michael, and Paul, and we also have a fellow surety folk as well, Bella. Thank you guys for joining us. We're very excited to talk with you. We hope everyone had a nice 4th. And without further ado, let me share my screen and let's get started.
Great. And I forgot to say, if anybody has any questions or comments, feel free to use the Q&A icons and the chat icons below, and I'll make sure the guys answer the questions. So I'm going to go ahead and hide myself.
Okay, and then the last housekeeping item is we'd recommend dragging the thing that shows our faces down to the very bottom and put it horizontally if you can. That way, otherwise some of the wording might get cut off. But all right, so without further ado, welcome. My name is Matt Leskanic. I'm joined alongside my colleague, Greg Angel. Our company is Surety Bond Professionals. We're a bond agency based out of Massachusetts. And today we are going to be talking about public construction work and specifically your bonding program. And the subtitle is How to Diversify and Grow Your Business in an Uncertain Time. Because obviously right now with COVID, you don't want to have all your eggs in one basket. So by looking into public work and specifically looking into bonding, that's a good way to diversify your backlog. So as mentioned, our company is Surety Bond Professionals. We're a bond-only agency. We're based out of Massachusetts. And our goal is to help contractors like yourself best structure their bond program. And that means achieve the largest limits possible, the most competitive rates, and have that flexibility to be able to bid on what you want to bid and ultimately grow your company and your revenue. And as I mentioned, my name's Matt, and Greg is a CPA, which is handy in our field. And today we're going to be talking about 3 different things. First, we're going to talk a little bit about why work in the public sector. Then we'll talk about the best way to secure public work. And then lastly, we'll discuss how to secure an effective bonding program, which is one of the most important elements to think about if you do decide to take on public work.
And again, my name is Greg Angel. I work alongside Matt. And before we dive in, let me get this poll going here. Bear with me as this is the first time I've used this. Yeah, so we just kind of wanted to conduct a quick survey to see where everyone stands in regards to public work. So if you could just please key in 1, 2, or 3, depending on the average amount of public work that makes up your backlog. So if you could select 1 if public work is a minimal portion of your backlog, 10 to 20%. 2 if public work makes up more, 20 to 40%, and then 3 if public work makes up a majority of your backlog, 40% or greater. So give that a second there. Awesome. Just gonna go ahead and end the poll. All right, so a couple of you don't really take on much public work. One of you seems to take on a bit more. That's fine. I think there'll be a lot in this presentation all of you can take away here. All right, so this is a great place to start. Why work in the public sector? Why does it make sense to diversify your backlog? Well, simply put, public work, it's always going to be out there. As of year-end 2019, the federal construction budget was $150 billion, while state and municipal work, it was $200 billion. If we use the pandemic in Boston as the example, though construction slowed down during the initial shutdown, The only construction that was allowed prior to May 18th was essential work, which was mostly public jobs. Not to mention, Trump has been discussing a $1 trillion infrastructure investment due to COVID. So there's certainly a lot of public work out there on the horizon. And payment is as close to guaranteed as possible. This is through the Prompt Payment Act for federal jobs and then each state's individual laws. I mean, that being said, it would be naive for me to say that every public job is paid right on time, but at least, you know, the financing for the project, it's certainly there. You won't have to worry about the project owner running out of money or the bank cutting off financing for whatever reason. Oh, there we go. Yeah, and public work, it does provide an amount of certainty. It is great to diversify because, as we've discussed, public construction work, it just tends to continue during recessions. And then more and more, we are seeing bonds being required in the private sector as well. So you might as well get that bond program in place now in case it pops up. You don't want to be caught on your heels there. Okay, so public work bonding requirements. Bonds are required on most public jobs by law. At the federal level, we have the Miller Act, which requires bonding on jobs with a contract value of $100,000 and over. The Little Miller Act is the state statutes that require bonding at the state level. Yeah, and so bid bonds, if you're familiar with bonding at all, you've probably heard of a bid bond. And this is the bond that's required along with your bid submission. And it guarantees that you'll enter into the contract if you are the selected bidder. And it just avoids the contractor from dropping out because maybe a more profitable job came along. And so if you are the selected bidder, once you enter into that contract with the project owner, a performance bond may be required. And this guarantees that you'll perform per the specifications of the contract. Pretty straightforward. Along with a performance bond, usually a payment bond goes along. And it guarantees the payment of any subs or suppliers on the job as well.
All right, so now let's talk about the elements that make up an effective bonding program. And we've defined that into three different elements. The first being an effective bonding program allows you to bid on projects that are within the size and scope of your wheelhouse. So for example, if you're bidding on a $3 million electrical contract, every day or every week, that should be something that your bond program can support and a little bit larger. Typically the surety looks at a multiple of 1.5 to 2 times the largest single job as what they would support. So a $5 million job, probably also still within your wheelhouse. The second factor is achieving a bonding rate that's in line with your competition. So if everyone else is bidding and they're carrying a 2% bond rate, but you have to carry the 3% bond rate, then that's going to make you less competitive, and you probably won't win as many jobs as a result, having that slightly higher cost. So you want to make sure that your bonding rate is in line with your competition and allows you to be competitive. And then the last thing is an effective bonding program provides you the flexibility and service to handle all bond requests, even some last minute ones here or there. And then diving even a little bit more into those, there are a few features that we would recommend considering when you establish your bonding program. The first being those program parameters that I hinted on. So if you're a contractor that does, let's say you do $8 million a year, you might want to try to get a bonding program that will allow you to do one larger anchor project up to about 4 or 5 million, and then kind of have that backlog up to around 8 to 10 million to allow you to support your continued growth. A lot of that comes in having that conversation with your agent and describing your goals and telling them where you want to go. And then in terms of rate parameters, there are 2 typical rate structures that we see. One is a sliding scale rate structure, and then the second is a flat rate. So typically for folks that need a good amount of bonds, or folks that have a well-capitalized balance sheet, you'll usually be on a sliding scale rate. And the advantage to that is that as the project gets larger, the sliding scale gets lower. So, for example, a $5 million project, you might start to look at a rate that slides down even a little less than 1% at that point. The general rule of thumb for rates is the 1 to 3% area. That's kind of the scale to expect with smaller contractors that use fewer bonds, usually on the higher ends, and folks that use more bonds on the lower end of that scale. The other thing to keep in mind is the indemnity agreement. So the surety is going to require that you sign an indemnity agreement, which guarantees that you'll basically stand behind your work and see those projects into completion. And they typically require corporate, personal, and spousal indemnity. I know that the bank doesn't always require spousal, but the reason the surety requires it is because they've had instances where if a project is going south, the owner transfers all of their assets to their spouse, and they say, hey, look, I don't have anything left. So to avoid that loophole, the surety typically requires corporate, personal, and spousal. Now, once you need more and more bonds, we can sometimes get the spouse off the indemnity agreement. And then as your company grows even larger, usually for the larger companies doing 20 to 50 million plus or minus, we can sometimes get the owner, the personal indemnity, waived as well. But a lot of that depends on the relationship with the agent and with the surety. That's something you kind of have to work towards. And then the last feature I'll mention, which I touched on briefly, was flexibility in service. You want to be able to bid on the jobs that you want to bid and get those bonds in time. And choosing an agent that has those systems in place, those bid bond processing and delivery systems, makes your life a lot easier and is an important feature to look for.
Looks like there's a couple of questions.
Okay, yeah, let's take a.
Yeah, so I saw those. I'm actually going to touch on both of these. One question was about the SBA, and then one was on working capital. So those are coming up in the coming slides. If I don't answer it enough, feel free to reach back out. But I think I dive into those.
Oh, great. Awesome. Okay.
Perfect. Now we're really going to dive into the specifics. So Greg's going to touch on these in just a second, but the three main ways to qualify for an effective bonding program are choosing an agent that will best represent you and will learn and understand your business and growth goals. Number two is preparing CPA financial statements. And then number three is opening up a bank line of credit to provide with liquidity. We're going to dive into those right now.
Yeah, so in choosing an agent, Matt touched on this briefly before, but the goal of an agent is to understand your company's story so they can accurately convey your business to the surety. Now, the agent's going to ask for some information up front to better understand your business, your goals, your objectives, so they can convey it to the surety and just place you with the right surety there. And your agent should have access to multiple markets. All surety markets, they have different values, different risk appetites, different likes, different dislikes. Your agent really should have a good understanding of their markets, and will use the information they learn about your company, the information they know about the sureties to match you with the right fit there in order to maximize your program and get you the most competitive rates. And then service, of course, in choosing an agent, service is always important. They should be able to facilitate your bond requests in an efficient manner. This way, you don't have to worry about your bonding. You can simply focus on your business. All right, so now in preparing CPA financial statements, this is a big one. So any programs that allow you to bid on single jobs over $1 million, the surety will generally require a CPA prepared financial statement. In some cases, you can get away with using internal statements. I get calls all the time with contractors who haven't used bonding in the past, but now they're in need of a one-off bond, or they're just starting out in bonding. And we're definitely able to help them even if they don't have CPA statements at that time. But if I'm speaking generally, if you're going to start bidding bonded work consistently, that's over $1 million. Really either a CPA prepared compilation, a review, or an audit will be required. And the difference between those three statements is the level of assurance given. So with an audit, the CPA provides an independent verification of the financial statements. I actually used to work in audit at the CPA firm, and I can tell you those are not fun. The lowest level of assurance is a compilation, in which the CPA does only the basic checks to make sure that the financial statements are free from obvious material misstatements. And finally, we have a review, which, as it states here, it does fall somewhere in the middle, but is the gold standard for sureties and is generally required for programs when bidding on jobs $1 million over. And then I do mention percentage of completion basis here. I know a lot of contractors, a lot of companies' taxes are done on the cash basis. The sureties will generally require that your statements are done on the percentage of completion basis. And this just recognizes revenues and expenses as a percentage of the work completed during the period. They just believe it shows a more accurate picture of the company. Yeah, and in doing their financial analysis, the surety has two factors that they look to first. So I know this was a question before. We're going to bring up working capital here, and it's just current assets minus current liabilities. And you can tell a lot about a company, how it's running, if it's liquid, or if it's too leveraged based on this. And let me see the question here. So what are the sureties looking for in terms of working capital to qualify? Again, every surety has their own appetite, risk appetite, their own. The number's going to vary from surety to surety. That being said, generally they like to see that your working capital, 5% of your current backlog is a good number to generally speaking. Now, along with working capital, they'll look at equity. A well-capitalized company, it's always viewed favorably. Sureties also find that a company with a backlog that is less than 10 to 15 times equity of a firm is less of a risk.
Greg, if I could just chime in and add on here. So basically like working capital, they'll do 20 times working capital and 10 times equity. That's kind of a good rule of thumb. As Greg mentioned, so for example, if you just some numbers, if you had 300,000 in working capital and 500,000 in equity, oftentimes you'll have a little more equity than working capital. You do 20 times the 300,000, so that's 6 million, or 10 times the equity, that's 5 million. So your aggregate backlog that the surety would be willing to support would probably be in the 5 to 6 million range. Now, they're also going to look at revenue from the past year. So if that's your working capital and your equity, but you only did $1 million in revenue in the prior year, you're probably not getting that high. But if you did, 3 or 4 million in revenue the prior year, and those are your metrics, then having a program of 5 million, 6 million makes sense based on the surety's perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. That's absolutely correct. Oh yeah, and here's just a couple things to be mindful about. Your accounts receivable versus account payables. Just try to keep the over 90s as low as possible. And then cash on hand, it's just always a good look if you have a healthy cash balance.
All right. Now let's talk about opening up a bank line of credit, because this is something that will help your business and it will help you from a surety perspective. So banks will typically extend a line of credit when times are good. What we like to say is that the bank will give you an umbrella on a sunny day. So when times are good, we'd recommend opening up that bank line, even if you don't use it at all or don't tap into it. There's typically no cost to have it open. So we'd recommend opening up that line to have that extra liquidity and that safety should you need it, because it might hurt your bonding limits if you don't have one. A contractor that has a line of credit in place and has that extra cushion is a little bit less risky than someone that doesn't. So even if you have the ability to self-fund and you have enough cash in your company, it's a really smart business decision to consider opening up a line regardless. A good rule of thumb is that your bank line should support 5% of your bond program parameters. So for example, let's say you want to have a 10 million backlog. you would want to have a line of credit for 500,000. That's kind of a standard expectation, 20 times the 500,000. And then the last thing to note is that it's definitely fine to be in and out of the bank line throughout the year, especially with sub trades who are a little more labor intensive, capital intensive in ways. Definitely understand that, and that's a good thing too. But you do want to make sure that if you do have that 500,000 line of credit in place, you don't want to be into it for 495 the entire year, because that's just going to appear to the surety that you're overly leveraged, and that's going to be a decent amount of debt, and that will actually be a hit to your working capital, being tapped into your line that deeply. So when you can, make sure you open it up, but also, be in and out of it, but try not to really run up that balance. A few additional bonding considerations, and I like these because these are kind of the elements that a good bonding agent can really get that extra little bit of oomph out of your program and expand your limits to the max. So first consideration is loans to and from the officer. So if as an owner you loan money to the company, the surety could have you sign what's called a subordination agreement, which basically guarantees that you'll keep that money in the company for the time being. And that will allow us to increase the equity calculation, which will help with your program. Loans to the officer, that's when you take money out of the company and loan it to yourself, the owner. That's not something we typically recommend, simply because even though that's going to be listed as an asset on the balance sheet, the surety doesn't know whether or not that's going to get paid back. So they're going to remove that from their equity total. Related entities, this is something else to keep in mind. So if you have your main construction company, but you also have an entity that holds your shop or your equipment, you're going to want to bring that into the equation as well, as that's going to help bolster equity further too. The personal financial situation, this is an important one, especially for folks that may only be doing private work or predominantly doing private work. The incentive there is not to build up the balance sheet and to take the money out of the company typically. So oftentimes Greg and I will see contractors that they're doing private work. They don't really have the company super well capitalized. And that's okay, but for bonding purposes, you generally want to keep some capital in the company. Saying that, we have a few sureties that we work with that will really take into account the personal financial situation. And they'll look at it as, if you have the company funds in one pocket or the personal funds in the other pocket, they're both two pockets in the same pair of pants. So that's another consideration when choosing a bond agent and choosing a surety. If you have taken money out of the company and have it personally, then you're going to want to find a surety company that's on board for that, and we'll go that route. And then the last thing, which was a question there, we're going to talk a little bit about the SBA assistance, and I'm going to let Greg discuss that.
Yeah, and so the Small Business Administration, they have a program called the Surety Bond Guarantee Program, and it's a lot like getting an SBA loan, in which the SBA will guarantee 80% of the bond on behalf of a surety. And it is a little bit more involved, but it allows small businesses to qualify for bonds they may not otherwise qualify for. I've had contractors reach way over their last largest job completed, and we were able to get them bonding with SBA support. One contractor I worked with, they had no CPA prepared financials, and their largest job completed was $750,000. We were actually able to get them approved for a bond that was just over $2 million with that SBA support. And let me take a quick peek at that question regarding the SBA. So yeah, what else is needed to get bonding support from the SBA? Yeah, so like I mentioned, it is a little bit more involved. Essentially how it works is that we would first approach a surety to get their approval with SBA support. And then I would have to submit the request to the SBA. So you do have to go through two underwriters. The good news is that the SBA is incredibly responsive, so it doesn't add that much time to the request. But there are a couple more forms you have to sign, and there is an SBA fee associated with it.
And I'd also add that having a bank line is really important for the SBA too. The SBA looks at working capital as their main indicator. They almost don't really even take into account equity.
All right, yeah, so just to summarize what we've talked about here, we talked about the benefit of diversifying your portfolio and why public work is a safer bet during economic downturns, as we're seeing currently with the pandemic here. We talked about the key considerations to look for in an effective bonding program. And of course, the importance of a professional bonding agent.
Yeah, and to tie it all together, a strong bonding agent is that key stakeholder that can assist you in navigating through the public construction world, the bonding world, and ultimately be that guide that will help you achieve your growth and your revenue goals.
And here's our contact information. I did see one more question from Mark Kelly here.
Oh, I apologize. I thought you guys covered that. That's why I said answer live. Go ahead. Yep.
Okay. Either way, the cost for a bond, if the contractor doesn't win or did the job, is it an overhead cost? So once you have a bond program set up, bid bonds are free. And then, of course, there's a premium due if you are the low bidder, and they require a performance and payment bond. Matt, I don't know if you have anything else you want to add there.
The cost of a bond. Yeah, there's no cost for bid bonds typically. You might need to pay a FedEx cost or something if it is going to be overnight, but a lot of folks are also taking scans and emails of bonds these days for bids.
Yeah, so again, here's our contact info. So if you do have any questions that may only specifically relate to your company, feel free to give us a call or shoot us a note. We'd be happy to help. Also, if you do want a copy of this presentation, just send an email over. Be happy to get that to you.
Guys, it looks like there's one, I think you may have covered this earlier in the webinar, but if you are approved for a bid bond and you are low on that job, will the surety require more information before they approve a performance and payment bond request?
Yeah, Matt, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, sorry. So can you say the question one more time?
Sure. If you're approved for a bid bond and you are low on that job, will the surety require more information before they approve a performance and payment bond request?
Yeah, so they might require a little bit more, but it's mostly in relation to the job itself. So they would want to see a copy of the contract, which is the contract that they're going to bond. So that makes sense. And then they would probably ask for bid results too. They want to know, is your price in line with the other bidders?
Right.
Are you right with the engineer's estimate, or for some reason are you 50% less and you left, so they just want to they ask one or two questions like that, but it's usually if they support the bid bond, they're ready to go and support the P&P.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, the sureties, they do their underwriting up front. So it's a much easier process once you're approved for that bid bond, because they are assuming if you are low that performance and payment bond will be required. So they're doing all that underwriting up front. Once you have that bond program in place, it's a much simpler process moving forward.
And that's why it's always going to be tougher to get a bid bonds than it can be to get a performance and payment bonds. So that's actually a good thing to know for if you're doing private work, because a lot of the time when you're bidding to GCs, they don't always need a bid bonds, but they might require a performance and payment bonds. And those are usually easier to get because the bid bonds are free, but the performance and payment bond is where the surety makes their money. So those are usually there's an incentive to support those more so.
Awesome. It looks like you guys covered the questions. So before we go, do you want to play Odd Man Out?
Absolutely.
Sure, let's do it.
Okay, so this one was tough for me because bonds are sort of over my head. This was a big learning lesson for
Well, now you know everything there is to know about bonds.
I do. So let's see if you guys know. So I looked up some statements that should be true for around certain kinds of bonds. I'm going to make those statements, and one of them will be the odd man out. Here we go. For a
Okay.
performance
Wait,
bond.
wait, sorry, one sec. Before we disappear into oblivion,
Oh, yeah.
Greg mentioned it, but even if you guys have any little questions, like even if it's just a one quick, easy follow-up, like, or a more specific detail, like don't hesitate to email us or give us a call. Like we're more than happy to speak further with any of you guys. So.
And will this PDF be available for folks or any type of, yeah?
Absolutely. Again, just email us.
Asia, if you'd like.
Yeah, I can actually put it in, once we record it, I can put it in the message part under YouTube, not message part, the comments part.
Okay. Great.
And I'll also, you'll have access to the attendees, so you can send that to them directly.
Perfect.
Okay. So guys, for a performance bond, a contractor or principal uses a performance bond to guarantee that it will complete the contract in accordance with its terms. Payment bonds, the beneficiaries of a payment bond are the subcontractors and suppliers and your neighbor's cousin. For bid bonds, the bid bond protects the project's owner if the bid is not honored by the principal, such as a contractor. Which statement is the odd man out?
Well, I've never come across a neighbor's cousin and looking up our bonds, so I'm gonna have to go with that one.
That's shocking. All right,
You almost had me there, but I think I was ready for that.
All right, congratulations. You won this week's Odd Man Out, and you will be receiving the digital album of Fetch the Bolt Cutters by Fiona Apple.
Big Fiona Apple guy, so that's great.
Awesome.
Nice.
Well, thanks so much. This was really informative. Seriously, I learned a lot. I didn't actually know much about the different, I didn't realize how many bonds there were. So, oh, wow. We have additional questions. Okay.
Oh, let's see.
Yeah, we can hang out longer. Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, no, we have time. Let me grab them. Okay. Oh no, tell Gina Melton I say hello. Foreman. So Gina Melton, Betsy says hello. I thought they were questions. Sorry about that. Awesome. Thank you guys so much. This was really informative. I'm super excited to edit this and get this up on our YouTube channel. And again, if you guys have any questions for Matt or Greg, it's Matt at shortybondprofessionals.com or Greg at shortybondprofessionals.com.
Great. Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone.
Absolutely. Have a great afternoon, everybody.